The girl in the dust. The prairie wind carried with it the scent of dust, hay, and sun-baked earth. Evening shadows stretched long across the ranch fences, painting the land in shades of amber and crimson. Out here, in the wide, lonely expanse of Wyoming, silence wasn't emptiness, it was freedom. But tonight, silence was broken by the faint shuffle of worn boots on gravel, hesitant, uncertain, as if each step feared the next. She was little more than a shadow herself, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, her face pale beneath a layer of dust. Her hands trembled as she clutched the fabric tighter around her thin frame. Her eyes darted nervously at every sound, the rustle of grass, the creak of a wooden gate, the distant neigh of a horse. She had run far, farther than she ever thought possible. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, but her heart thudded with a fear that would not allow it. Her name was Clara. 17 summers behind her, not yet 18, yet life had already shown her its cruelty. She had been raised under the stern hand of an uncle who saw her as little more than labor, cooking, cleaning, tending to his household while enduring his temper and the ever-looming shadow of being promised off to a man twice her age. When she overheard that arrangement whispered across the dinner table, something inside her had cracked like dry timber. That night, with nothing but a bundle of bread crusts and her shawl, she had fled into the darkness, guided only by moonlight and desperation. Now, after 2 nights of walking, her shoes nearly falling apart, she stumbled upon the outline of a ranch house, lamplight glowing warm in the windows. It looked safe. It looked human. But Clara didn't trust easily. Not men, not anymore. Still, hunger gnawed at her, thirst burned her throat, and exhaustion dragged her down. She stood there at the fence post, staring at the house as though it were a mirage. Inside, Samuel Hartley, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 30s, was oiling his saddle by the firelight. His dark hair curled slightly at the ends from sweat and dust, his jaw marked with a shadow of stubble. He was the kind of man the land itself seemed to shape, steady, weathered, unyielding. Since the loss of his wife 4 years ago, he had lived quietly, raising his young daughter and working the ranch alone. He had learned not to expect surprises. Until his daughter's small voice broke the silence. "Papa, there's someone by the fence." Samuel straightened, setting the saddle aside. His instincts sharpened. Out here, strangers could mean trouble. He reached for the rifle leaning by the door, more out of habit than intent, and stepped onto the porch. The sight that greeted him stopped him short. A girl, thin as a reed, clutching her shawl, eyes wide like a frightened fawn. She didn't look dangerous, she looked lost. "Evenin'," Samuel called gently, lowering the barrel of the rifle so it pointed to the ground. "You lookin' for someone?" Clara froze, lips parting but no words coming. Her throat felt tight, her breath uneven. She took a step back, ready to run. "It's all right," he said, voice low, calm. "Ain't nobody gonna harm you here. You need something." From behind him, his daughter peeked out. Emily, just 9 years old, had her mother's golden hair and a curiosity that lit her eyes. She tugged on her father's sleeve. "Papa, she looks cold." Clara's gaze flickered to the child, and for a fleeting moment, the tension in her face softened. Children didn't lie. Children weren't cruel the way adults were. Samuel noticed. He handed the rifle back inside, leaned against the porch post, and nodded. "Emily's right. You want a blanket? Maybe some water?" Her lips finally moved. "Please." The word was barely more than a whisper. Emily dashed back inside and reappeared with a wool blanket, almost too big for her to carry. She hurried down the steps and crossed the yard, her small hands offering it to Clara with a smile. "Here. Mama made this one. It's warm." Clara hesitated, then slowly extended her hands, taking the blanket. The warmth of the wool seeped through her chilled fingers, and something deep in her chest ached. She hadn't felt kindness in so long, it hurt almost as much as it healed. Samuel watched the way Clara clutched the blanket, her eyes shining with unshed tears. His jaw tightened. Whoever she was, whatever road had brought her here, it wasn't an easy one. "Come on inside," he said finally. "You can rest a spell." Ain't safe to be wanderin' at night." She shook her head quickly, panic flashing across her face. "No, no men." Samuel stopped, lifting his hands in surrender. "Fair enough. You don't trust me yet. That's your right. But my little girl's right here, and you've got my word. No harm'll come to you under this roof." Clara's eyes moved from his face to Emily's. The girl nodded eagerly. "Papa always keeps his word." It was Emily's voice, innocent and sure, that made Clara's feet move forward. Step by step, she crossed the yard, clutching the blanket like a shield. Inside the ranch house, warmth enveloped her, the smell of stew simmering, the crackle of firewood, the soft ticking of a clock. Samuel guided her to a chair by the hearth, but kept a respectful distance, letting Emily chatter instead. "What's your name?" "Mine's Emily. Do you like horses?" "Papa's got 6. One of 'em's mine, but Papa says I got a share." Clara swallowed, her voice faint. "Clara." Emily beamed. "Clara. That's pretty." For the first time in days, Clara's lips curved upward, though only slightly. Samuel ladled a bowl of stew and set it on the table, sliding it toward her. "Eat. You look like you could use it." Her hands trembled as she lifted the spoon, but once the first bite touched her tongue, hunger took over. She ate quietly, almost ashamed of how quickly the food vanished. Samuel pretended not to notice, simply refilling the bowl once more. All the while, Emily sat beside her, talking about the ranch, her school lessons, the names she'd given her dolls. And slowly, Clara's shoulders began to loosen. The fear in her eyes dimmed, replaced by something else, a fragile spark of hope she barely dared to believe in. By the time the fire had burned low, her eyelids drooped, exhaustion winning at last. Samuel stood, took another blanket from the chest, and spread it over the small cot near the hearth. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. "No one'll bother you. Tomorrow, we'll figure what you want to do next." Clara hesitated, then nodded. She lay down on the cot, still wrapped in Emily's blanket, her body sinking into warmth and safety for the first time in years. As her eyes closed, she heard Emily whisper beside her, "Don't be scared. Papa takes care of people. He'll take care of you, too." Clara wanted to believe it. For now, she let herself drift into sleep, the sound of crackling fire and the faint hum of a lullaby on Emily's lips guiding her into dreams. Shelter becomes home. The first light of dawn crept through the small ranch windows, painting the wooden walls with a golden glow. Clara stirred, her body wrapped snugly in the wool blanket Emily had given her. For a fleeting moment, she forgot where she was. The warmth, the smell of coffee, the soft sound of a child humming nearby, it felt like a dream. Then memory returned, and her chest tightened. She sat up quickly, her eyes darting around the room. Samuel was by the stove, pouring coffee into a tin cup. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, braiding her doll's hair with the concentration of an artist. "Morning," Samuel said, his voice low and even. He didn't look surprised to see the nervous tension on her face. "There's bread and eggs if you're hungry." Clara hesitated. Hunger pulled at her again, but so did caution. She nodded slightly. Emily hopped up. "I'll get it for you." She hurried to the table, piling food onto a plate before Clara could protest. "Papa says we always share with guests." Clara's lips curved in the faintest smile. Guests. That was what they called her. Not a burden, not trouble, just a guest. She ate quietly, and Samuel respected her silence, though he kept stealing glances at her. He could see the way her hands trembled when she lifted her fork, the way her eyes flickered to him as if measuring whether he was safe. Whoever had hurt this girl had left wounds deeper than any bruise. After breakfast, Samuel pulled on his boots. "Got work to do with the horses. Emily, keep Clara company." Clara's heart lurched. The idea of being alone with a child didn't frighten her, but the thought of being left behind stirred old fears. Abandonment. Being unwanted. She gripped the edge of her shawl. Samuel noticed. He crouched a little, meeting her eyes directly. "You don't have to stay in. You can come watch if you want. Fresh air might do you good." Clara blinked. No man had ever given her a choice before. Slowly, she nodded. The barn smelled of hay and leather, alive with the sound of nickering horses. Samuel moved with practiced ease, brushing down a chestnut mare, checking her hooves. Clara stood at the door, hesitant. Emily ran inside, giggling. "Clara, this one's Daisy. She's mine." The mare lifted her head, ears flicking toward Clara. Something about the animal's gentle eyes eased her nerves. Tentatively, she stepped closer, holding out her hand. Daisy snuffled against her palm, warm breath tickling her skin. "She likes you," Emily announced proudly. Samuel leaned against the stall, arms folded. "Most folks take weeks before Daisy warms up to him. You've got a soft touch." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wasn't used to praise. She didn't know how to accept it. She lowered her gaze. "Animals don't judge." Samuel's jaw tightened at that, but he didn't press her. Instead, he handed her a brush. "Want to help?" Her fingers closed around the handle, tentative at first, but as the strokes grew steadier, her shoulders loosened. For the first time in years, she felt useful in a way that wasn't demanded or forced. Days slipped into weeks. Clara became part of the rhythm of the ranch, though she still spoke little. She gathered eggs with Emily in the mornings, fed scraps to the barn cats, and sometimes sat by the porch at dusk, watching the sun sink into the horizon. Samuel never pressed her with questions, but slowly the pieces of her past spilled out, in fragments, in whispers. "My uncle, he said I was to marry a man I didn't choose. I couldn't." Samuel said nothing, only handed her a mug of tea. His silence wasn't cold, it was steady, like the ground beneath her feet. For Clara, that silence was more healing than any words. Emily, on the other hand, filled every quiet moment with chatter. She braided Clara's hair, taught her childish songs, insisted they share secrets like sisters. One evening, while the crickets sang outside, Emily curled up beside her and whispered, "You're not just a guest anymore. You're family." The words broke something open inside Clara. She hugged Emily tightly, tears slipping down her cheeks. She hadn't cried in years, it had never been safe. But here, in this little house, with a child's arms around her, she finally let go. Samuel saw from the doorway, his heart tightening. He didn't interrupt. He only thought, maybe this house is healing all of us. It was late one evening when the storm came. Wind howled against the windows, rain lashed the roof, and thunder rattled the sky. Emily, frightened, clung to Clara's side. Clara stroked her hair, murmuring comfort, though her own heart hammered at the violence outside. Storms reminded her too much of angry voices, of slammed doors. Then Samuel appeared, setting an extra log on the fire. He looked at Clara, then at Emily, and finally sat down across from them. His presence was steady, a rock against the storm's fury. "Don't be scared," he said, his voice calm. "Storms pass. Always do." Clara met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. Trust. Gratitude. Something more, fragile but undeniable. Later that night, when the storm had eased and Emily had drifted to sleep in Clara's arms, Samuel quietly draped a quilt over them both. Clara stirred, her eyes meeting his in the dim light. "You've given me more than shelter," she whispered. Samuel's voice was low, almost rough. "And you've given us more than you know." Their eyes lingered, the air thick with words neither dared speak aloud. Not yet. But the seed of something deeper had been planted, quietly, gently, in the soil of trust and kindness. Weeks later, Clara stood by the corral, watching Samuel work a young stallion. The sun was setting, turning the sky into fire. Emily laughed as she chased barn cats across the grass. Clara wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, the same one Emily had first given her, and smiled. She had arrived terrified, innocent, and broken. But now she was learning something new. Hope. And with hope, perhaps even love.